Good evening. This is the September 9th, 2025 meeting of the Shrewsbury Select Board. I'm Beth Cassavant. I'm filling in this evening as chairperson. We're going to take a moment to go around and introduce ourselves.
Carlos Garcia.
Greg Richards.
Michelle Conlon.
Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager.
Keith Baldinger, Assistant Town Manager for Operations.
Justin Dobson, Assistant to Town Manager.
This is our first meeting since we lost a community member to a senseless act of violence on August 28th. As we all know, Kevin Doherty walked his son to Coolidge School and was shot and killed on the Jordan Pond path on his way back home after confronting someone who was defacing a bridge. There are no words to adequately describe the ways in which lives changed in a single moment. While the family of Mr. Doherty carries the greatest burden of loss, each of us lost something that day too, and we are left to grapple with how something so violent and tragic could happen in our town on a walking path around a picturesque pond in a quiet neighborhood on a beautiful late fall morning. As a board, we extend our sincere and deepest sympathy to the family of Kevin Doherty. We have been and will continue to partner with the schools and Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services to make sure the family has the resources to navigate the days and weeks ahead and support for as long as is needed. For all that was awful about that day, we'd be remiss if we did not call out the heroes: our selfless public safety professionals, our town manager and his staff, school superintendent Dr. Sawyer and his staff, the teachers and staff at Coolidge School who navigated a lockdown on the second day of school, the teachers and staff at Beale who welcomed busloads of students who could not be delivered to Coolidge, the bus company that communicated with drivers quickly and efficiently to reroute students away from potential harm, state police, DA Early, and first responders from mutual aid communities, parents and families who followed procedures and put their trust in the professionals even when every fiber of their being urged them to get to their kids and hold them tight. This is the scenario you prepare for while praying it never becomes real. In the hours, days, and weeks that have passed, this community has come together to support the family of Kevin Doherty through meal trains and donations, messages of support and sympathy. In our darkest hour, the light of who we are as a community shines bright. Let us take a moment of silence to honor the life of Kevin Doherty. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on with our agenda. The first item is to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Item number 2 is to review and act to approve the minutes of August 26, 2025, which was a meeting, and September 2nd, 2025, which was a workshop.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Announcements and reports. Board members, any announcements and reports this evening?
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Just a reminder to the public, Mr. Garcia and I held office hours today from 5:30 to 6:30. It's just a reminder that any member of the public wishing to talk with the Select Board can do so on the first Tuesday of the month from 5:30 and 6:30, and the conference room across here from the Selectmen's meeting room.
I think you said you had one.
I do have two. I wanted to elevate two surveys that the planning department currently are live. The first one is a placemaking survey. Many in the community probably have seen the blue and yellow benches and chairs that have been floating around the community. They're currently doing a survey to solicit feedback on those. So encourage folks to fill that survey out. And the other survey opportunity is in regards to public transit in the community. As many may know, we do have a WRTA bus route that goes through town, through certain segments of our town. And the planning department, in coordination with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission and the WRTA, are studying the feasibility of adding amenities to the Maple Ave Transit Corridor. So encourage folks to find those surveys on the town website and fill them out.
Thank you. I have a couple more. The Complete Streets Committee will be holding a public outreach meeting to review the project scope and timeline for sidewalk improvements along North Quinsigamond Avenue. The meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. at the Donahue Rowing Center. And I also just wanted to recognize Representative Kane for securing funding to purchase AEDs for high traffic areas that are now installed and ready to use. The locations include 2 at Dean Park, one by the ball field that is attached to the snack shack, and one near the playground that is attached to the restroom, and then one at the Coolidge Fields near the pickleball courts, and one at the Oak Middle School fields. So grateful to Representative Kane for her advocacy to get us those life-saving devices that are now ready to be used in high-traffic areas. That's it for announcements and reports. I will move on to the town manager's report. Mr. Mizikar.
Good evening, board members. I will turn it over to Mr. Baldinger to make a couple updates with regards to the battery energy storage system. I know a resident came in and made some public comment at one of your meetings, and this is something that we've been tracking through the planning board process and at the staff level on a day-to-day basis. So Mr. Baldinger has some updates in response to not only questions we received from the resident at your meeting, but through other means as well.
So definitely as a direct result of those abutters comments, they both came to both planning board and select board meeting. We have worked with Selco and the planning department to require the developer, which is RWE, to include the following safeguards in their agreement. They will be doing a site-specific hazard impact assessment for the facility, including analysis of noise impacts. And we will have an independent third-party review of that plan funded by RWE. This is very similar to the planning board third-party review peer review process. And then we'll also have a comprehensive response and training plan for the fire department and mutual aid partners. And then we will put a community notification process within that utilizes our town's code red reverse 911 system. So if there are ever any issues on that site, we have a process to reach out to not only abutters, but the town in general. So these requirements build upon the conditions already set forth by the planning board, which included financial surety, liability insurance, ongoing maintenance, and public outreach meeting, which we will do pre-construction for this project. And then in addition to these protections, the project is expected to provide approximately $850,000 per year in avoided costs to Selco. So this results in long-term savings for the Shrewsbury ratepayers, which is about $17 million over the 20-year life of the project. So, with this in mind, the town wants abutters and residents to know that their input is directly shaping the outcome of this. And we do truly appreciate their feedback when we have projects like this and that come forward.
Item number 5 is public comment pursuant to Select Board Policy 31 to offer citizens the opportunity to provide public comments during Select Board meetings on matters within the board's authority. No one has requested to speak at this evening's meeting, but in the event that someone would like to in the future, please just notify the manager's office by noon the day before our meeting. We will be happy to put you on the agenda. Item number 6 is under financial business, and it is the fiscal year 2025 year-end review.
All right, so as we customarily do this time of the year, once we've formally closed the books, the financial books for the prior fiscal year, which ended June 30th, we like to share those preliminary results with the board as they start to shape our conversations for the special town meeting in the fall and our longer-term financial planning and start of the next budget year cycle. So closing the books really for local government means doing everything that a business would do and finalizing all payments and revenues by July 15th. The accountant then works to make sure that everything is order, and then we're required to submit all that information to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for their review. They are unaudited in that they're not audited by an independent financial firm, but those unaudited financials, once received by the Commonwealth, ultimately leave us to a certification of free cash and retained earnings for all of our enterprise funds and utilities. So we have submitted everything to the Commonwealth, and we anticipate having information back on the free cash certification and retained earnings no later than around the time of your next meeting in about 2 weeks. So we'll give you an update once we get those back from the state. So where did we start the year? So fiscal year 25 budget, the operating budget was a little over $154 million. We turned back or did not expend all but $2.1 million of that appropriation. So that represents about 98.62% of the funds that were provided to us for town operations were expended. The majority of the funds that aren't expended really come through a couple categories. When we have vacancies in positions throughout the course of the year, whether it's for a short-term leave of absence or someone leaving for a new position or another opportunity, creates a gap in expenditures, and we return those funds back. And there's certain accounts like snow and ice that are really variable depending on the winter, or fuel, and those kind of consumable accounts that really vary year to year. And when we don't have the need to spend the funding, we turn it back, because then it becomes an asset to the town. It lands in free cash, and we use those for critical investments in things like our capital improvement plan and other one-time expenditures in the future. And it ultimately is a reserve asset of the community that is reviewed when we go through any bond rating process and is looked favorably upon. So fiscal year 25, local receipts and prior 4-year actual. So we often like to talk about local receipts. It's our third largest revenue category behind the tax levy and the funding that we receive from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But it's a great economic indicator of what's going on within the community, and is very variable to the larger economic conditions that we find not only in the Commonwealth but throughout the region and the country. So we saw another year of really strong continued growth that we've had in place since fiscal year 22. So we'd enjoyed receiving 12.6% in additional revenues over what we budgeted for local receipts. And that, although not as high as fiscal year 23 or 24, still represents a very strong position. And it's still very strong because year over year, as we've seen receipts outpacing our estimates, we've tried and we have become more aggressive in introducing more revenue at the front end of the budget process, giving us more opportunity to make strategic investments. But those revenues continue to come back and beat our estimates, which puts us in a really good position. So you can see those positive numbers in the change year over year occur until the FY26 budget, but that negative number is a really good number. That represents the fact that we have only budgeted about 85% of the total revenue that we actually received in FY25 for the FY26 budget. So going in, we have about a $3 million buffer to start the fiscal year. So even if we would see significant economic changes over the course of a 12-month period, we should be able to weather that storm and not impact services throughout the course of the year during fiscal year 26. When we look at local receipts, we break them down into some significant categories. The largest source of funding is motor vehicle excise tax, and it continues to be a really strong performer for our local receipts. You can see that in FY25, we raised a little over $8 million, and we've only budgeted $7.6 million in fiscal year 26, so we're in a good spot. And we've grown year over year, every year since 22. And while the growth, again, in FY25 in comparison to FY24 year over year is a little bit less, it's still very strong. And I don't think we're going to have any challenges in meeting the fiscal year 26 budget amount. Investment income and interest, these are returns that we receive on funds that are invested through our financial manager, an investment firm, Bartholomew. And the vast majority of these funds fall into what's called our operating fund that we invest with them. It represents about 40% of our annual operating budget. It is a cash flow it's basically the cash flow, the bottom line, and the checking accounts that we have on hand that we're able to make a variety of lengths of investment in. So really positive news continues here. Again, growth since fiscal year 22 consistently and rather sharply. $1.6 million in growth between fiscal year 24 and 25, well below that amount for the FY26 budget. And that's something that we're really going to need to maintain, because the reason that we've seen this type of growth in investment income is because the bond market and the returns that you receive through a traditional low-risk investment measure, something as simple as a short-term CD or treasury notes, those interest rates are very high at this point, 4%. So as the Fed considers adjusting the key interest rates, likely these returns will decline. So we have a good buffer year over year, and this is something that we really think about in January and February with our investment firm, and look ahead to the next year, understand how much we have in hand for cash and what the investment ladder is. It won't all drop off immediately, even if the Fed does change the interest rate, because we do have CDs and notes laddered out there for up to 24 months. So we're in a good spot, but this is something that I don't think we can get much more aggressive with in the future. So the landfill is a key source of revenue under local receipts. We have experienced growth over the last few years after kind of a level performance, and that's because folks may recall about 18 or 20 months ago, the Shrewsbury facility started receiving ash from one additional location, which was the Saugus incinerator. Is no longer going to the Saugus landfill, so that's kind of normalized. You can see we're a little closer on the margin for the FY26 budget in comparison to FY25 actuals, but given the really predictable income that we get from this, we shouldn't have any issues looking forward to 26. And licenses and permits, another strong year, a lot of continued growth within the community, so think building permits and things like that. So stable year over year with some margin for FY26, but a lot of projects in the pipeline, and again, not something that we're concerned about in this fiscal year. This chart is really trying to show the key categories that are driving the year over year growth across local receipts, and it's really defined into the categories that I primarily went through on the last page. So a little bit from trash/landfill, a more significant amount from motor vehicle excise, a minor amount from licenses and permits, but then the greatest growth over the last 3 years, each and every year, and in total has come from that investment income and interest, again, based upon the kind of nation and global economic conditions and where the key interest rates are and what treasury notes and CDs are providing on returns. Since we have very low risk tolerance, so we benefit from these economic cycles. Just looking at this another way, a little bit deeper, just showing the budget to actual across key categories. You can see that every category except for departmental fees met budget expectations or really exceeded budget expectation. Interest, income, and penalties, doubled what we expected it to do. Just kind of summarizing where all that revenue comes from to build in the total increase year over year and get to the final $20.2 million in return versus the 15.8 in total budget. This is something that we're working forward to each and every year. We've added another $1.6 million into the FY26 budget estimate over FY25. So continue to try to whittle the difference down and use all the assets that we can when we're building the operating budget. Just a graphic of the performance versus actuals. And then moving away from local receipts here on the final slide, I wanted to just talk a little bit about our largest revenue category in a little more detail. So this is the property tax revenue. So the real estate and personal property tax makes up the total tax levy that is assessed in the community. You can see we have very strong performance. That's one good thing. There's positive and benefits for municipalities relying upon property tax. One of the greatest benefits is it's a really stable source of income. We have, people don't want to get behind on who are many people's primary asset and investment in their life, which is their home. And over 60% of the revenue that we receive comes in through banks, which means that, you know, residents are paying their tax bill through a monthly mortgage escrow. So again, you know, over 19.5% collections. It's been really stable over time. You know, less than 100 properties currently in our tax title program, and that means that they would be more than 3/4 behind. So in a really good spot. Personal property lags behind. It traditionally does. We have less teeth and less ability actually to collect. There's no lien process when it comes to personal property, and of course, that's only assessed on the assets of private business interests within the community, non-real estate private business assets. So a really strong year. As we think about FY '26 and move to the special town meeting this fall, we do have an initial estimate for free cash to be right around $12 million. That is made up from that turnback of a little less than 1.5% from the FY '25 budget, and then the overage that we've seen in the local receipts. So putting those together, building on the base of about $8 million that we had left over, should get us back up to about $12 million.
And what's policy level? Like what, in numbers, I know it's like 5%, but
Yeah, so 5% of the budget would be around $8 million.
should we be above
Yeah,
policy level?
correct, for free cash.
Board members, any questions?
Yes,
Go ahead.
a few questions. One specific one, quick. The 409 South Street license and permit, I guess, that we voted on, I guess we would call it a rebate. Is that contemplated in 25 or 26 numbers in the local receipt side?
So it'd be 26 receipt.
So in the projected, I guess, reduction, that's already kind of contemplated in the budget on that specific line?
Correct.
Okay. Another follow-up. The one question I do have, maybe this is just my math side of it here. So there was a $2 million surplus based off of what turnback was. There was a $4 million, though, if you looked at the difference in the Schedule A receipts. So we took in $4 million more than budget, 4.7. So where was, let's say if everything else in the budget was perfect, we would have turned back 4.7 because we took in 4.7 more, if everything else was equal, correct? So where does that other money go to if we're not budgeting? Is it, this was free cash that was then decided to be expended in other areas? Or how is our gap? Because it would be like, essentially, we spent $2 million more somewhere else than we anticipated because we collected more revenue on the Schedule A receipts, correct? Or should I rephrase?
I'm not, yeah, if, I'm trying to.
So I guess my math is saying, right, we took in additional 4.7 than budgeted.
Okay.
Schedule A
in
receipts.
Schedule A
Fair.
receipts, correct.
However,
Yep.
if, like I said, if we spent the budget everywhere else perfect, we would have had turned back 4.7 million because our expenditures would have been on budget.
No, two separate categories, right? So the local receipts, once we achieve our budget amount, the rest just flows to free cash.
That's what I guess I was asking.
Yep.
You would see it in free cash.
Yes, it goes to free cash. The 4.7 goes to free cash.
Yeah.
As does, Justin, if you can go back to slide 2, the 2.1 that we turn back. So you add those two together. Those are the two primary amounts of money that boost the free cash from where we left town meeting in May.
But I guess this is where I'm quite, maybe I'm digging deeper than I need to on this, but it's just a curiosity here. So if we had a $154 million budget,
Correct.
and that was already contemplating what the Schedule A receipts were holistically at the original budgeted amount,
Yeah.
and of what you thought you were gonna, any kind of additions to free cash or expenditures. So I still would say that, wouldn't you turn back more because you had more revenue than anticipated? Even though I know where you're saying it's going into free cash.
So, yeah, so just two separate buckets of terms. So there's no excess revenue in the turn back. Like it's, think of what we budgeted that we didn't spend, and, you know, as far as the operating budget.
Yep.
And then on the revenue side, we estimated a particular amount to make sure that we had enough money to cover the full budget. But like, it's in a separate bucket. So that $4 million follows to the revenue side, and the 2.1 falls on the expenditure side. So they don't ever get combined though, until they go to free cash.
Okay. I think I got that.
Maybe we can
Well, we'll have to dig
in.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. Yep.
That's fine. I think that's it for now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I did have a question on the turnbacks. I was wondering if there were any trends in the turnbacks, if there's any departments that year over year are not spending a certain amount on certain things. I don't know if there are any trends. I know you, at the top, explained what it is, so.
Yeah, nothing concerning to me. And so there is comfort in some of the trends that I would see, right? Like within the police department, we know that the FY25 budget had one additional officer that was budgeted. We budget for the full year for that officer, but sometimes depending on how successful we are in recruiting someone and getting them into an academy, we could have 4 or 6 months of that fiscal year that position isn't filled. I still argue that having all funds in place on July 1 is the best long-term budgeting approach. So we see the larger budgets contributing a larger amount to the turnback. So the police department, the highway department are where those funds are primarily coming from. We had a pretty good year with health insurance. Almost $300,000 was turned back in operating support as well. That's a $20 million line item. So again, it's not a lot of money. So consistency in where the money's coming back from, but no concern because of that
That's helpful.
or in that.
I did have
Go ahead.
one. I forgot. This is more of a philosophical question, I guess, as I learn this stuff. So I guess, what's the decision-making process? Because essentially, I understand, I guess, like clarify, the reason why you're going to budget less than probably what you're going to see, because especially in the Schedule A receipts, you're saying it's prior to FY24 levels.
Mm-hmm.
But we're doing that on purpose to essentially say we believe we'll probably see higher revenues in that space, but we don't want to essentially assume we're going to get higher revenues and be a shortfall. Fair?
Yep.
But like in this particular case, I mean, you're talking almost $3 million where, for instance, like you say, you have a town meeting article on an ambulance is $540,000. Realistically, you're probably going to get at least that money in the receipts.
Mhm.
How do you make that decision on what you're budgeting for, knowing that, well, we could probably use that $3 million, and it's probably realistic we're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
What's that pivot to
Yeah.
decide what you use?
So there's a couple of things. So we know that we regularly use $2.5 million every year in free cash at town meeting. $2 million of that goes to the capital improvement plan. So we want to continue to generate sufficient amount of money in the previous year to be able to dedicate to longer term investments. The second part that we think about when we're looking at local receipts is it's a real big challenge if we get too aggressive and we don't meet our revenue number, because then we're going to have to come in at some point very late in the year, March or April, and make some significant adjustments. And it has to happen that late in the year because of that $8 million that comes in motor vehicle excise, about 6.5 of it doesn't get billed out until the end of February. Just that's how motor vehicle excise tax works, and that's when we get the update at it. The second part is a check on us from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So if we go in there and we increase receipts significantly year over year, they will audit us a little more deeper into those line items. And while we could prove out that, we have substantial revenue and justify it, they will really kind of push back on us if we're budgeting over 95% of the previous year. So that's what we really think about. So because we have the comfort of knowing that, we're gonna meet a revenue number, we have expenditure side limits from the override agreement itself. And we've never been challenged to have enough revenue to meet those requirements. In the end, we know we're gonna get those money put in place immediately after the year closes, and they'll be available for the special town meeting. So we're never really losing an asset.
Well, to me, it's looking at it from always saying, like, you're always driven to say grow, 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 and like knowing that, like you say, motor vehicle excise, and license and permits, you're forecasting it down, yet we know of what the developments are coming into town. You're gonna see additional residents who are gonna have excise tax, and you're gonna see additional licensing and permitting based off of some of the projects that we know are coming. So that's the only one I was clarifying, but I understand
Yep.
it's somewhat of a
Yep.
conservative approach to ensure that we don't get in trouble, like you're saying. If there was a shortfall,
Yep.
it's always nice to have extra, we can just put in free cash and then we can utilize it when we need to. It's just odd to look at forecasted negatives, I guess. On a sheet.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, we just show it this way in this snapshot at the year end. But, we will have a thorough conversation with the board about the revenue manual, which is the first item that we produce towards the subsequent year's budget process in October. So, we will take all this data, we will look at local receipts in great detail. We use a compounded average growth rate, and that will include the most recent year. That is one of the challenges, right? We are setting a budget and producing a budget in February, if you look at this year, February of 2026, and trying to project revenues for, June of 2027. So it's a long time, and, if the Fed decides to go in and, get really aggressive with the interest rate, and, lose 0.5% 3 times over the next 18 months, we're gonna see a significant change in the revenue that we receive.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I always think about too is like, we don't have this ability to be super nimble, right? So being conservative, right? Because if we fall short, the only way to fill the hole often is town meeting action or a reserve transfer at the finance committee, and there's only so many dollars that you can do a reserve transfer with at finance committee. So kind of have to get it all in place because of needing that town meeting action to utilize free cash or, any other revenue stream. That's kind of something I think
Yeah.
about.
I mean, the 42% is a lot, though, on a forecasted down, right?
100%, yeah. I mean, and, but when we're growing at, in
Yeah.
in a reasonable amount every year, 10 or 15%, it's just really great that we're experiencing this type of growth. I mean, I know local receipts, and, the first budget I produced here was $12 million. We've essentially grown $1 million on average every year, and, I mean, it's phenomenal.
We put it in free cash, right? So that we're able to use it to do purchasing. You mentioned the ambulance, that sort of thing. Can you just sort of talk a little bit about the override stabilization fund and what I know we're not adding to it, right? But we don't have enough to really bring us to an additional year of extending the override.
Yeah. So, I mean, where we are right now, and we can talk, about this as we look at some adjustments that we need to make to the operating budget. I think we're at a point in time in the longer range model, the override model, where there's nothing that we can do to balance out fiscal year 28. Like, we're just in a spot where we have a sufficient amount, $9 million in the override stabilization fund. But once we start to draw down upon it, it kind of goes really quick because of the year-over-year revenue growth that's required to meet the expenditures at 4%. So, we're not going to contribute any additional dollars this year. It's kind of held level for FY26. We're not taking any money out. We're not putting any money in. But when we start to draw down upon it for fiscal year 27, it's going to be pretty significant. And then the following year, about 50% greater than that. So it would go really quick. You're looking at a $150 million budget. Even at 4%, you're feeding it $5 and $6 million a year just to maintain service levels.
Right, so even if you took the turnbacks and the additional growth from local receipts, it's not enough to get us where we would need to be, and then we would be starving our ability to do the other things that we're trying to do, like stand up an ambulance service and have a capital improvement plan that's robust and meets the needs of the departments and the community.
And if you're relying upon those one-time sources of revenues for too long in any fiscal cycle, the amount of money that you need for the next override is going to be untenable, and you're gonna have to cut services. You know what I
Right.
mean? I don't think anyone wants us to ask for a $15 million override, double, you know what I mean, what we did last time. So we
Yeah,
have to kind of play the timing right on how much one-time revenue we're using into the recurring budget.
okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
That's all on
You good?
this. Yep.
Alrighty. Okay, that brings us to item number 7, which is under new business. It's to review and act to amend the traffic rules and orders to establish a new school zone on Spring Street. I know, Mr. Truman, you're joining us this evening to talk about this. So I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you go ahead
That's fine, no,
and
it's-
introduce.
Makes it a little quicker.
Tell us what
So
you're
yeah,
about.
this is basically a culmination of the traffic study school study that we did in April for the board. We identified all the schools, those that have school zones, those that don't, those that meet the criteria for school zones. So this was the last one that was left, so it made sense to get this school zone established. So essentially, we will be putting a school zone on there.
All right, are there any questions? Comments?
I have a question, not actually related to Spring Street specifically, but how frequently does the paint on the roadway that says, slow school, get refreshed? Like a notice on Lake Street, it's pretty worn down. Excuse me, it's pretty worn down.
Highway
at this
typically
point.
does it every year. Part of
Okay.
there's line striping. I can double check, but they usually go out and do all the stenciling. And then they do the center lines.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
And not 100% about the specific school zone. I think it's great to put the school zone in, but I know part of the process here is that we're updating some rules and orders, I guess it says. So in that, I guess there's a couple things I'm asking, and I think this is maybe good practice for any regulation, is to have some type of revision table in the document at the end, because if we're gonna amend it, last time it was amended was 2023, at least having a note the next time it's amended, what was changed. Because you go back in here, when we see things like, which is kind of a follow-up question, are we looking at something like this and seeing if things are still valid? Because, they got speed regulations and yield signs from like 1967.
Yes,
Is that,
it's-
are those things revisited ever to say, does this still make sense?
I think it's a coincidence that you asked that question, because we had the same question. We had a stop sign on Oak Meadow we had a question from the resident about whether it was in the right location. So we went and checked the regulations, it's actually not an official stop sign. So that kind of got the flag going, is it time to go back and revisit that document and see all those signs that are listed, are they still there in the right place, are they valid? So
Yeah, I think it
that's
would.
an exercise that we are going to move forward on.
Yeah, because I think if you're gonna go ahead and revise this document, add the school zones, because it's both, because the one that was on Crescent
Yeah, we did Crescent and Oaks last time.
didn't get updated in here yet.
I think, the clerk still has to update it, so, yeah.
Yeah, because this was still September 23. At least that's what we were given.
Mhm.
I don't know if there was a new version. And then the last question, even on the Crescent Street one. So my last question on all these is, how do we determine the effectiveness of the school zone? And what I mean by that, is it just that we're putting in sign, blinking light, or do we also is there ever a collaboration, say, between police department and looking at, is there certain, let's say, focus on school enforcement? So, because we put them up there, are people following it? Is it effective? Because I know there was recently, I think it was maybe a week ago, Crescent and Spruce.
Mhm.
There was an incident, and there's a lot of people had mentioned there's concerns about that intersection. So how do we determine that, is the school zone alone enough, or should we look at it more holistically?
That's a good question. I know, so we do have the Traffic Advisory Committee that was formed a while ago, which engineering's on that, highway's on that, and obviously several members of the PD. So that is something we will probably look at. It certainly comes down to checking on enforcement. And a lot of it's complaint driven. People still think they're speeding, and then PD will try and get a traffic force unit out there to monitor speed. PD did just buy a new software, which is allowing us to take almost real-time traffic data. It's SDSK. It's a web-based thing. It basically tracks a lot of those metrics in cars, cell phones, satellites. And it's real-time data, so we can actually now go in, for instance, like Spruce, we can go back there and say, yeah, we can tell pretty quickly. It's monthly. It's updated monthly, and we can get real metrics on what the speed limit is. You know, it even has like predicted crash data. So I think we're starting to get the tools where we can start to evaluate this stuff a lot easier. Traditionally, in the old days, we'd have to go out and do a traffic study, set up the equipment, monitor it for several months, come back, analyze the data. So we're getting to that point now where we can do it a bit better in real time.
Yeah, because I know a lot of the schools, it's the looping line aspects that cause a lot of issues, which sometimes can extend well beyond school speed zones, where that's where I think a lot of some of these incidents are, and is that behavior in the mornings. Are we looking at it, analyzing and say, is there a better way? Because I think
Yeah,
a lot of
that's-
parents are
that's-
probably frustrated by the process. I know that's not.
Yeah, and I think we've come a long way. And I think the traffic, that's one of the primary issues of the traffic commission is to look at these kind of things. So.
Okay, thanks.
If we could only solve the pickup and drop off line. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and then we can,
there's a lot of partnership that's done with the school department. We've had residents from that neighborhood come before us before, and through work, collaboration with the school department and with the PD and with the schools themselves, right? Because those communications come directly from the school building principals around behavior in looping lines and pickup lines. We try to do the best we can, but at the end of the day, I think you're trying to retrain parents who are very busy trying to get their kids to and from school, and it's a real challenge. So we'll do what we can, I think, by putting in the school zone, raise awareness around the fact that there is a school there, and hopefully, people will heed the warning and the lights and slow down and, maybe, see some improvement there. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question, comment.
Mr. Garcia?
Thank you. Mr. Truman, really appreciate all the work that you did for this. I know that the school zone study that was completed, I think, mid-April of this year was really helpful for us to review what schools are eligible for a school zone designation and which ones are not. And I guess, I don't know if I have a question, but I would like us to see, I would like for us to do something for the schools that are not school zones, that I see here, for example, Beale, Coolidge, and some of our private schools. I don't know if they all have perhaps like slow children signs or something indicating to commuters that there are going to be children in the area. Because, while I appreciate that we are doing what we can for most of the schools, I think that it's important that we are doing what we can for all of them, so. guess
I
that's-
mean, there are criteria that we have to follow for state law, though. I mean,
Right,
so in
right.
order to establish a school zone, the school zone has to be on the primary frontage of the property, and there has to be a crosswalk and a
Right.
sidewalk.
Yep,
And it's not available to private schools.
it is not available
Yeah.
to private schools.
Yeah. School zone designations are not available to private schools.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I understood that when I reviewed
Yep.
the study.
Yep.
But I think that it would still be important for us as a board to still perhaps include some signage that would indicate that there are children nearby.
Got
And I think that that's something that we could do.
You're meaning like advisory signs?
Advisory
like
signs,
like what you
which
would
I am-
see, children at play and things
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Because even, at Beale, even though it's not a designated school zone, there are still kids that walk down Lake Street. And,
Right.
When those kids come out, there's like a big congregation of parents and kids like on that corner of the driveway.
Right.
It's not technically a school zone with a, reduced speed, but it's still certainly a safety issue. And, there's some painting on the roadway and things like that. But I think advisory signs, even if we can't, it doesn't comply with the state regulations as a school zone, but putting advisory signs like children at play and things like that, just something to trigger a little bit more.
Yeah, just something to, when commuters are driving by, just to know that there's gonna be children nearby.
Yeah.
I know they're unenforceable, but I still think that signage would be important.
Yeah, to trigger a little awareness.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, happy to look at that.
thanks.
Anything else? All right, we'll take a motion. Someone like to make a
I,
motion?
yep, I move the board approve amending the traffic rules and orders to include Spring Street under school zone pavement marking and traffic sign permit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Thank you. All right, item number 8 is to review and discuss the draft warrant for the special town meeting on Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. So we'll turn that over to you, Mr. Mizikar.
So I have a couple slides to walk us through the warrant to hopefully bring clarity to the articles. Not a heavy warrant that we're proposing, rather consistent to previous special town meetings in the fall. So I'll just work our way through the 9 warrant articles that we have proposed here for you this evening. This is just the draft warrant, so I'm going to provide as much information as I can, and this is all subject to change as we try to work out the best, financial plan for the town on the financial articles, and then, other details related to warrant articles that we're proposing. Things get a little bit more concrete when we bring the warrant back to the board at your next meeting in 2 weeks to finalize the list of items the town meeting is going to consider, and then gets a little bit more final when we go to the finance committee with actual proposed motions and more details associated with those articles. So a couple key meetings ahead of us. That finance committee meeting will be held on October 9th, Thursday evening at 7 o'clock here at the town hall. So the first article that we're proposing is the ability to make adjustments to the fiscal year 26 operating budget. At this point in time, as things are, kind of coming into clarity for the fiscal year, there are a couple of things that we see within the budget that are either opportunistic or we're going to need to change. So we would like to make a transfer from the town manager's budget, salary, and wage line item to townwide training and professional development using excess budgeted salaries due to position vacancy. So this is an opportunity to be able to invest within the staff that we have, using some of the funding that we know we're not going to need for the fiscal year, even if we do make hires within the near future. We have a couple months of salary already in hand, so we'd look to transfer those to better use and townwide professional development. We do see a need to make some level of adjustment, and I don't have great clarity on the total amount for the tax title program. The key driver behind this, why it was not foreseen when we set the budget in May, was because of the recent changes to tax title legislation. The state now has come out with the full details on the process that we're going to have to follow when we put properties into tax title. And this is not just foreclosure, but the tax title process itself and the notification process is required through the law and regulations is much more onerous and much more time consuming, both for the tax title attorneys that we use and the treasurer collector's office, who's responsible for providing both in-person and mailed notices to every property that falls into tax title. So we're going to need additional resources to fill out 3 additional state forms and the methods of delivery of those forms for all properties that we have in tax title, which I mentioned before is about 94. Increasing funding for the pension system. So I have there that the pension system is currently funded at 95.6% on an actuarial basis and 93.4% on a market valuation basis as of July 1, 2025. We did achieve full funding January 1st, 2021, as we did the actuarial analysis then. And we've backslid a little bit from that due to market returns and just other wage growth and cost factors that one could anticipate over time. So we are looking to make a one-time supplemental appropriation to the pension system. It is requested or recommended by the executive board of the retirement system to be $500,000. I think that's an unreasonable amount. We're really looking at the available sources of funding that we can make that contribution from. I would like to make it a blend between available tax levy, which I'd like to talk about, what we have, and then any free cash potential, or once we have free cash certified, potentially using a portion of free cash. when we look at the overall kind of financial picture for the town, the revenue outlook has improved since May. There's a couple key factors associated with that. I just want to refer to my notes here. The first part of that is new growth. So new growth within the community will be certified at $294,100 greater than we anticipated or that we estimated in May. So that puts it up over $1.6 million in new real property taxes year over year, which is significant. State aid, including Chapter 90, the final state budget provided $757,938 in additional state aid. Almost 3/4 of that is Chapter 90 aid, which only can be used for roadway improvements, but additional Chapter 70 aid coming in at $150 per pupil meant a sizable increase over what we had estimated from the Senate numbers when we went to town meeting. Another benefit with regards to the state budget is our charges and offsets. The money that the state takes away on the backside of the cherry sheet was approximately $93,000 less than we anticipated. So those charges being lower and additional revenue puts us in a good position from what the money that we receive from the Commonwealth. In total, from new growth, state aid, and then the reduction of state charges and offsets, gives us $741,997 in new revenue that's available to us at the special town meeting versus the annual town meeting in the spring. So as we think about how we're going to approach not only Article 1, but some of the subsequent articles in the warrant, we'll be relying upon this tax levy that's available to us to meet some of those obligations and proposed changes that we're looking to make. All right. Any questions on Article 1, or would you like me to just continue?
Just a comment that, this kind of goes hand in hand with the previous presentation, right? Because we have the turn back and we have the additional revenue generated from local receipts coming in higher than we anticipated. We now have these abilities to kind of write everything.
Yep.
And be able to make some investments or, do something like put money into the pension system that we need to keep that, at the funding level that it needs to be at, and, be able to anticipate and fund the tax title increase as well. So I think that, kind of gives us the flexibility when we have these dollars coming in.
So, a quick question, just a clarification on the tax title. So I know that, for instance, if you ever did go through the foreclosure process, that now as a town, you actually have to give back the market value, correct, of the property. So is that essentially contemplated in, or how do you contemplate that loss? Is that, like, how do you do that?
It's a great question. I mean, the most straightforward way would be, obviously, if you auction the property and you receive a cash amount from the winning bidder, right, then you would provide that cash amount back to the former owner. And that would be net of the taxes that were due and any other fees that we incurred throughout the tax title process, including things like serving these notices and the attorney's time on each property. The bigger question becomes if you take a property and then use it for municipal purposes, because you still have to provide that equity back based upon the assessment. And I don't think anyone has done that yet, but it is something that we are going to have to consider for 15 Maple Avenue when we go forward with it. And you have a finite amount of time to actually make that payment. I think a silver lining for 15 Maple Avenue is that there's over $400,000 that is, due back to the town. So the amount would be marginalized by that, but it still could be a couple $100,000 that we would have to think about making an appropriation for.
But in reality, in that case, there's a high probability, potentially, that the value of the use of the property would be less than what the back tax is owed, meaning we
Could be.
wouldn't have to pay anything, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Article 2?
Yes.
All right, so Article 2 is an adjustment to the solid waste budget, and this is, I think, probably one of the most unanticipated things that we've really looked at in the FY26 budget so far. So the solid waste budget was set at $3,658,841, and the way that we are going to satisfy that requirement is roughly 50-50 from the tax levy and program revenue, which is, of course, bag sales primarily, but then bulk waste stickers and retained earnings. And we are planning to use about $200,000 in retained earnings, and retained earnings are basically the free cash of any one of these enterprise businesses. So it's the money that is either additional revenue that we received in the previous years or money that we turn back at the end of the year. So the challenge that we have with the enterprise fund for solid waste right now is that the FY25 year-end revenue is approximately $327,000 less than it was anticipated. There's a couple factors that are playing into this, 3 of them that we've identified. They're all associated with less waste being disposed of through blue bags, which is really the purpose of the pay-as-you-throw program. But specifically, we have seen an increase, and I'm going to provide the data to you at an upcoming meeting, and definitely with the Finance Committee. So we've seen an increase in recycling since we implemented the single-stream recycling in the blue bins. We now have a food waste composting program that's in place and available to residents that's being utilized. And we also do know that some residents have chosen to go to private haulers versus using the town system. So those 3 factors are what we've identified that has led to less revenue in fiscal year 25 than we anticipated, which kind of puts a initial burden on the FY26 budget because we don't have any prior year funding to use to supplement the new revenue that we'll build this year. So we are looking at ways to overcome this funding gap, which is around, in total, $400,000. We will have an opportunity to reduce the budget, so that's the first thing that we're looking at. How can we reduce the budget and make sure that we don't have anything excess in there? We would have the opportunity to use some of the tax levy that I previously identified, depending on where we use it in other places. And then we could also look at bag rates and other fee structures for the enterprise. Now, I know we just put a rate increase in place in July. That was a 10% increase over the previous rates that hadn't been adjusted in the last 5 years. So we have taken that into account in our analysis, but we're still coming up short, mainly because of a reduction in total revenue, mainly bag sales year over year. So we're still working through a solution on this. We're trying to, again, reduce the budget to the greatest extent possible to marginalize the amount of new revenue that we need to put in place to fill the gap.
Are you able to pinpoint when the bag sales began to decline?
We haven't yet, but we can look at that. I mean, one of the challenges that we had in the initial review, which is why we can't pinpoint it yet, is Stop and Shop closed in October. They were our largest bag retailer. Now, Stop and Shop going away shouldn't influence the total bags that get sold, right? Because you can't go to BJ's in Northborough and buy a Northborough bag for our program. But it's just complicated the data. It'd be a lot cleaner if we had the same retailers year over year to look at between 25 and 24.
I wonder if all those people who used to shop at Stop and Shop aren't buying bags as often because they're not as easy. Like you used to just be able to grab them as you were checking out. Now you gotta actually think about it.
In the data, we're a little confounded because it does, we are seeing that total year over year reduction, and Stop and Shop, our largest retailer, going away. It makes the data really dirty, if nothing else. And but we're trying to pour through it to draw some conclusions from it.
I wouldn't have thought about it if you didn't say it, but like that's where I used to get bags, and I would grab one probably every time I went through. And now I have to think about it, and I get like 5 rolls at a time at like Wegmans or something. But that's interesting.
The trash reduction is real. It's, you know, tons of trash. I want to say 100 tons, but I may regret that. But it's a lot of volume.
Yep.
So, you know, we'll bring that full data set back, which, you know, we're developing to help overcome this, and give it all to you and make a recommendation on how we fill this gap.
Right.
Mr. Mizikar, do retailers, when, you know, a store sells the blue bags to the customer, is the retailer purchasing the bags ahead of time, or do they remit a payment to the town after, you know, on a certain schedule based on how many they're selling?
They purchase on delivery to them.
Okay.
So we pay to have the bags manufactured, and then they go to a warehouse in New England. And then when a retailer, you know, his inventory needs replenished, when our manufacturer delivers those bags, they invoice the retailer, which is payable to us, and then they give us the packing slip to know, you know, how our inventory is being distributed, and then the retailer pays to us. And we have very low receivables, and that's something we've worked on over the last few years to really get, you know, to a small amount. We don't have anything over 60 days at this point, so, but yeah, that's how the whole process works. They pay as soon as they receive the bags, and then they're made whole by the retail sales.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Article 3 is adjusting the capital budget. We have one item that's proposed for a new capital item within fiscal year '26, which is the acquisition of an ambulance. I think everyone's well aware, but because of growing demand within the town, which has resulted at sometimes increased response times, especially when mutual aid is needed for medical calls, we've been working towards implementing emergency medical services through our fire department and targeting a start date within the first quarter of calendar year 2027. So this is a request for $540,000 to buy and equip an ambulance, which it takes about 12 to 14 months to go through that process. The proposal that we have initially this evening is to split the cost roughly in half between free cash and the apparatus replacement fund that was funded through the initial part of the FY26 capital budget, which needs reappropriated when we actually make acquisitions. So there's $250,000 that was put in place for that, so we draw that in, make up the difference in free cash, and then move this forward. So this would be a draw on free cash.
Quick question, I just want to clarify, so the apparatus fund was, you're using 100% of the funds
Yes.
back, and then you backfill that
We will, yeah,
at the same time or in the future?
in the future.
Okay.
In the future, at the annual town meeting in this coming May, we'd add back to it.
About the same amount you anticipate?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we want to keep $250,000 a year in there, because an engine, you know, that we need to replace every 5 years is pushing $1 million, so, yep.
But, so you wouldn't double it just because, wouldn't you?
Oh, this year we may have to double it,
That's what I was
yes,
gonna
because
say.
we're drawing it
Yeah,
down. I'm
yeah.
sorry, yep, but you're right, yep. Okay, so item 4, Article 4 that we're proposing is transferring $310,854.55 in opioid class action settlement funds into the opioid settlement fund account. This is not going to be a recurring action that we need to take in the future. We have a special revenue funds where all those dollars can land, but between the period of August 2023 and March 24, as the account was being established, those funds did not make it into the special account, so we need to transfer them from free cash, where they are right now, into this fund for use in our opioid program that's being established through the Public Health Department. Number 5 is Uber and Lyft, per ride assessment transportation network company funds that we receive. 10 cents per ride. We have funds on hand now from the Commonwealth from 2024 and 2025, a little over $30,300 that's available, and we've been dedicating those funds to alternative modes of transportation, pedestrian mobility initiatives, and sidewalk improvements. Article 6 is a placeholder right now for prior year bills, which require town meeting approval and appropriation. We don't have any at this point. Article 7 is just being held as customary for a citizen's petition if one should arise for this special town meeting. Item number 8 is a feasibility study for the renovation and expansion of the high school. This would be funding for what's called Module 2 of the Massachusetts School Building Authority process, in really providing a preliminary assessment of the needs and design approach for a high school addition and renovation project. The total request at this time is $3 million to cover the cost of about 24 months of work, fees related to professional architects, engineers, and an owner's project manager that we're required to hire in accordance with state law. So that $3 million is the total cost that we anticipate needing to cover the scope of work for the MSBA in Module 2. The MSBA is a grant program, and they, our anticipated reimbursement rate is 52%. So because of that reimbursement, we're proposing a model that's been very successful for us in the past, which is appropriating 50% of the funding required, or $1.5 million from free cash, and then seeking $1.5 million borrowing authorization. So MSBA requires us to demonstrate that we have full appropriation of the total cost that we anticipate in local dollars, despite the fact that they signed an agreement with us to, give us a grant for 50% of those costs. So once we can demonstrate that we have full funding appropriation between, in this instance, free cash and a borrowing authorization, we would be allowed to proceed. We would leverage the reimbursement process from MSBA and never really have to borrow that $1.5 million. So having the $1.5 million on hand in free cash and then seeking regular reimbursement through MSBA, which we always do, would mean that we would never have to make that borrowing, but we're required to demonstrate that we have those funds locally. This is, again, a common approach that we use. We've done it with the most recent project with the Oak Middle School, and a much larger project in the Beale Elementary School under the MSBA program. So substantial investment of $3 million to get some key feasibility study work done. Building committee met for the first time this evening at 6 o'clock to review enrollment projection, which is still under review and certification by the MSBA, as well as a capital and facilities maintenance plan that's been accepted by MSBA. So this is the kind of the critical next step in the high school addition and renovation process.
Question for you on, I know we had spoken briefly about funding for the private roads bylaw that doesn't have any funding
Yeah,
attached to
sorry.
it. Where would that,
That would be in the FY26 operating budget. I failed to mention that.
okay,
Yep.
So
We'll
you'll
add it to the list.
add a list or
Yep.
increase the highway budget?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah. All right, any other questions?
Just on the next step after this, when does the actual design funding need to be in place? If the feasibility study,
Yeah.
follows the path and
Yep.
is approved, let's say, or there's.
So this next step, MSBA has been very clear with us that they would not consider a request for entrance into the final rounds. You take a big step, you actually go to full project funding after this. And they were very clear that it wouldn't happen before the fall of 2027. So that's the first time we'd be eligible to bring an application to them. And there's flexibility a year beyond that, depending on where we are in the process, to still remain in our spot in line. So that could be as far as 2028.
So does this give you a set of some form of design, a rudimentary design?
It does,
like,
yeah.
to a
Yeah,
certain-
it's a preliminary design concept, I think it's called.
Yep.
Something like that.
Conceptual.
Yep, yeah. So, you remember in the MSBA process, you are only at 25% design whenever you get the full funding authorization from them.
And this process, the feasibility process, also includes all of the educational feasibility study part of that to make sure that, the designers build it as it, to fit our needs.
Anybody else? Do you have anything else?
One more article?
Yep.
Yep. So, an important topic for us to consider is, zoning changes. I know the board, we talked in the workshop last week and have had other conversations offline individually about considering changes relative to overlay districts within our primary commercial corridors, Route 9 and Route 20. So staff has been reviewing the zoning bylaw and the purpose behind these overlay districts along the commercial corridors. And the overlay districts that I'm talking about within Route 9 and Route 20, the Lakeway overlay and the Route 20 overlay, were established to enhance the likelihood of commercial and business development with a heavy incentive on allowing residential components through mixed-use developments. And, I think if, the first overlay district, which was Lakeway, was put in place in the early 2000s. And I think if you look back on the development that has occurred, right, you would say that the zoning was successful. The question is now, is it something that we want to continue to incentivize in our primary commercial corridors, having a residential component? And if we do we have enough parameters in place to right-size the proportion between the commercial development and the residential components of those developments? So we've seen a lot of recent developments, obviously. We now have another overlay district that everyone's familiar with, MBTA 3A. So we have to take all these changes into account whenever we're looking at our zoning. So again, most of these are targeted at mixed-use provisions, and many would recall that we attempted to adjust mixed-use definitions last fall, but this got sidetracked because the proposal was accused of being only related to the 1 through 7 Maple Avenue project, which it was not. But, with development interests continuing to be strong, and there being a desire, I think, to, continue the commercial nature of these corridors, we're looking at a number of adjustments that we could possibly make within the zoning bylaw to make these changes. So staff is fully committed to that, and we've been working on it. We've engaged with council, but we're very concerned about the timing of this for the fall town meeting, but we want to have a discussion with you this evening. But if you don't mind, I'd just like to lay a couple other things out. So it's really challenging because the overlays are somewhat complicated, and I think the last thing that we'd want to do is make a change without appropriate due diligence, community engagement. We want to make sure we avoid unintended consequences. And, complicated can be, what do I mean by complicated when I think about the overlay districts? When we've looked at this over the last couple weeks, we think that there would be 3 separate articles, at least 3 separate articles that would be required to adjust the zoning while maintaining stronger mixed-use options if we wanted to have that as an option, like vertical mixed use. We would like to have the time to do additional review because there will be an impact on lots that have been developed using these overlay districts. They'll be non-conforming if we take the overlay district away. And, there's technical refinements that we'd really like to be thoughtful about making if we're going to adjust, whether it's lot size or ratios or floor sizes when it comes to mixed use and residential. And we want to engage with the residents, we want to engage with property owners, and we'd like to be more thorough in our legal vetting. Again, our number one goal would be to avoid unintended consequences of these changes. So that's where we stand tonight. That's our primary position, but, we know there's a need to really seriously consider and make changes within our zoning to make sure we preserve the commercial nature of those corridors. We're starting to see some projects like 312 Boston Turnpike that's getting beyond the spirit of our zoning bylaws and really leveraging a small commercial component to put a lot of residential in, and that's not the intent. And so we have the opportunity to take action. We're just concerned with doing that this fall versus working diligently over the next 3 to 4 months to get a better outcome for the spring. But happy to talk about that priority with the board.
Questions?
Yes, of course I have questions. Lots of questions. So, Mr. Mizikar, is there no mechanism then to put in more of a blanket
Yep. So,
article?
so a moratorium is, I've learned a lot about this over the last few days. A moratorium is a specific term under state zoning law, and it comes with a lot of requirements that we don't think we can actually substantiate or justify at this time. It requires a specific challenge to be identified and a specific amount of time to study and overcome that challenge during that period of time. Something like a particular use isn't necessarily a challenge that's going to satisfy the definition of, or the requirements for that moratorium, according to the legal counsel, the advice that we've provided. It almost seems more complicated to put a moratorium in place than it would be just to change the zoning outright.
Okay. So then, as a follow-up, my opinion on this is, it's one of those things you can never put back in the bag. So once somebody pulls a permit, once they do a plan, we can no longer have control over what happens there. And the longer we wait, in my opinion, the worse off it is. And I remember conversations, if I go back to, if we make a change, right? Because I go back to what the conversations around the MBTA zone was, right? Which we had a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And in those conversations, it was stated that if we put a zone in place and the state would come back and do something, it's simple, we can just take it out.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, wouldn't that similar thing apply? If you put something in place and there's an unintended consequence, you can come back in the spring and reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't act now and we wait until everything is more complete or we have more time to vet it, a lot of things can happen between now and then, which we may or may not ever be able to go back from, because now the site is developed in a certain way that may not be what the community at large is looking for. So for me, I would rather be looking at trying to be more aggressive now and put this in place than wait, because I know how much can happen in that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm coming from on this.
Sure. My initial response to that is, I don't disagree with you. One of the biggest things that we need to consider if we're going to make a decision is the impact to those lots that we will create as non-conforming under the new zoning. So if we would remove an overlay district, it would create, non-conforming lot status for properties like Lakeway Commons, that whole development, Market Basket, properties like this. And what are the implications to that? And ultimately, it may be something that we're willing to live with as, the community that those businesses operate in and those properties are developed in. The challenge that we have is just timing. How do we vet that out?
Right, but just to clarify that one, right, those would be pre-existing non-conforming moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the Zoning Board of Appeals ultimately has the ability for any modification to say, in the spirit of intent of the Zoning Board of Appeals, is this creating an undue burden? And I would say that at the time we developed it, that is exactly the reason we were using the overlay district. We purposely changed it as a community, not for the existing lots,
Mm-hmm.
but for controlling future development. I would think that the Zoning Board of Appeals would take that into account in making those decisions, which ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, they would have the ability to deal with if that issue came up, because that would go in front of them, correct?
They would. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You're right.
I think what gives me pause is the timeline of it and not having the opportunity for enough public engagement. right? We talk a lot about making sure that the public is aware and that things don't feel rushed or, that people aren't surprised by decisions that are being made. I do not disagree at all that this is a very critical zoning change and that it is very important that we look for ways that we can preserve our commercial corridors. I agree that the project at 312, what is it, 312? Boston Turnpike, like, when I heard that project, it became even more apparent that it's time to act. But just because the loudest voices might be saying that they'd like to see some sort of action, it doesn't mean that that's all voices. And I worry that if we move in a way that is like, you're saying like 3 weeks, right? We have like about 3 weeks before this, well, not even 2 weeks when the warrant gets signed.
That's correct.
That is not providing the public with the opportunity to be made aware of the zoning change. And if a temporary moratorium is not an option that's open to us, and we're talking about May, I would want to see us do this the right way and make sure that there's an opportunity for as many stakeholders as possible to be heard.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Mizikar, what is the timeline on like the planning board process for zoning changes? Because I know this has to go through them.
Yeah, so it has to go through 2 public hearing processes, which at this point, we would have to, have special meetings to accommodate that. I mean, we did do that for MBTA last year, given the timing of where we ended up with state review and things like that. So it's not impossible to do.
It's a lot of information to gather.
Yeah.
In that time frame. Is it possible to do a special town meeting in between
be another
fall town meeting and our spring annual town meeting?
Yep.
And that could potentially give us the space that we need to go through this process properly and gather all the information that we need, but not wait until May. It is an issue of having commercial development in the community is really good for our community for a lot of reasons. And, between just the cost of sort of servicing commercial property and also the benefit of getting personal property taxes from commercial development. And, we're approaching meeting our 10% state minimum requirement for affordable housing and looking at these zoning overlays that allow for residential, that, like you said, we're sort of, people are kind of pushing the limit on what's in the spirit of it. And we made changes years ago at town meeting, lollipop lots and, these residential lots that had these big long arms that were 10 feet wide that, so we made changes like that. And this kind of falls in the same spirit of that. But I think that, maybe we should, if we can't gather the information that we need and go through the process the way we need to do this properly in time for October fall town meeting, perhaps considering an interim special town meeting somewhere in between.
Okay.
Do we open ourselves up to any sort of legal ramifications if we remove overlay districts?
Not in the sense like someone could claim harm against the town. I don't know, like we wouldn't be liable. Like the community has the right to adjust zoning bylaws at its discretion. There's implication for property owners, right? But it's not something that we're liable to them to maintain or hold or subject to suit.
The other thing I know we talked about too is like we sometimes will make zoning changes and it is amazing how a developer will find the loophole,
Yeah.
right? And so making sure that, giving it the time to be as airtight as possible to try to find those loopholes proactively, I think would be to our benefit. We didn't establish overlay districts in 2 weeks. Other comments? Do you have other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I guess one of the comments I'd make is they're taking advantage of those loopholes now. I mean, you can see it. And I understand and I agree that, yes, we always want to get as much feedback, community engagement as we possibly can. But in something like this, that there really is no going back, and you can correct in the future, that if there's something was modified overly, and we come to the realization, let's say, that something negatively impacted somebody, just as Ms. Conlon said, you can either go to a special town meeting to correct it, you could wait until May, and we can go back and reverse some things. So it's not as though the change is a permanent change to the zoning bylaw, but those impacts of not making a change are permanent on the community. And I just want to make sure we're taking that into account as we're doing this, and not, because I know you said about loudest voices, but I think it's pretty clear that a lot of residents have feedback on the speed in which certain development's occurring in town, and having the ability to actually do something now to help address some of those concerns, I think, in my opinion, is important. I get it, it is quick, but like Mr. Mizagar said, we did it in the past for state mandate. It is possible. And it's not like we're rewriting the whole bylaws. I know they're complicated, but we're tweaking what exists there. The commercial underlying zoning still stays there. The commercial development can still occur. It's just addressing what a majority of the residents, or a lot of residents, have expressed concerns about and frustrations with, and it's some of the speed of development in town.
Mr. Garcia, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, just, I agree with pieces of everything that you all are saying. I think that zoning is complicated, and I would want to make sure that the process that we're doing is thorough and has a lot of public engagement. I lean more towards Ms. Conlon's point in that we could call another special town meeting to address this specific issue, because I do agree with you, Mr. Richards, that time is of the essence, and the sooner that we can do something, I think the better. I also am concerned about the timeline, that it might be too quick for this one, but I think that this is important enough, a priority not just of our board, but I agree. I think the community also has given us feedback time and time again about this, and so us working on this and making this a priority would be important to me. So whether, if we're able to do it for October 22nd, that'd be great, but if we have to call another special, I would be okay with that.
I mean, we have had special town meetings in March. It might be a good compromise. I mean, I hear what you're saying about MBTA communities being quick, but I don't think it was 2 weeks quick. Right? Like, it was longer than that. When would all the hearings need to be completed by?
I mean, by town meeting, I don't know any other requirement.
Yeah, there's be some special,
Yeah.
some special planning board meetings put in place, but.
We'll continue to work on it. Talk to you at your, before the next meeting. See what we can come up with.
I think it's the next regularly scheduled planning board meeting wouldn't be until the first week of October, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So there's really no, unfortunately, it'd be great if there was an opportunity to have some type of public hearing where the public could say, you know, what is the level of importance? Is this, you know, just to get some feedback on it, but I don't know if there's really a mechanism to do that.
Well, I mean, I think there's two things, right? It's like, we know it's important to the community.
Yeah.
But there's also the realistic nature of whether or not this is something we can get on the special town meeting warrant. And do it in a way that we give the opportunity for public feedback to happen. I mean, this is the first time we've really had this conversation in public. And, I mean, historically, the board has been criticized for moving ahead on things after talking about them in public for, you know, more than just once. So I do want to be mindful of that, while also balancing, you know, just the critical nature of getting this done in a timely manner. I mean, I hear what you're saying, I don't disagree at all, but I also think that there are some challenges to scheduling for planning board members, making sure that they're able to manage the extra meetings. Their meetings are very heavy and long, and doing it right. like making sure that we have in place what we need to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. I mean, I think that's a good compromise to think of a special town meeting when Mr. Mizikar is able to advise, if this timeline can't be met, what is the most reasonable timeline that you think could be met, and work towards that. So we're not waiting until May, to your point, but we're not ramming it through.
And it's just as a clarification, on the zoning piece, the line in the sand is building permit issuance or application of building permit, of being able to maintain current zoning.
Application to the planning board.
So when that is submitted,
Yeah, correct.
and that's another concern,
Yeah,
Right.
it is.
because that can happen
Tomorrow.
well in advance
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
and not actually complete for
Mhm.
6 months, a year potentially, if not longer.
Yep.
Is there a bare bones version? Sort of like,
Of this?
yeah, like, just really,
I mean, that's where we've been trying to work through without
I know you have.
severe, implications. There's implications to every approach, and I understand everything can be fixed. It's just what approach that we want to take and when we're adjusting the zoning bylaw.
So just remind me where we landed. You're gonna give us an update as to whether or not,
Yeah, I mean,
There's some
we'll keep,
feasibility to
yeah.
this?
I mean, I want to go back and look at Form 7 and see those hard deadlines, because there's a lot of 14-day periods of public notices and what could feasibly done. I mean, from the professional staff standpoint, this evening, we think we wouldn't advise adjusting it at the October town meeting because we're concerned with what we're going to produce and recommend to town meeting, because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty that we're going to have in what we're trying to convince town meeting to do. And I worry about that.
right. Also, any bylaw changes need to be approved by the Attorney General's office,
I'll-
right? So we need to
Well,
make,
but as soon as we, provide notice of the change, right, like.
right, but I'm just saying,
It's-
like, we
it's
wanna make
subject
sure
at
that we
risk.
have we don't
Yeah,
wanna
oh, correct.
have like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
shoddy, like a rush bylaw that
100%.
then would not be approved, and then
That's
we're
right.
kinda back
Yep.
in a different place.
Yep.
I get it,
I
you're
understand
like,
what you're
you're
saying.
definitely
Yeah.
more of a risk taker than I am.
Well, I'm just trying to think too, I think where you're getting at, which I believe was, is there a step
Mhm.
approach, meaning phase 1, phase 2, where phase 1 is very, very targeted of the modification, and then we'd have the time to
Right,
be able to do a more thorough review, which has potentially bigger impacts later on,
correct.
Yeah.
which
Yep.
makes sense to me if it's feasible. So, yeah, and I just think it's just such that hot button topic that there's a lot of interest in, that if we are able to do something like that, it would.
We also have to remember that, once we provide notice of a public hearing to adjust the zoning bylaw with certainty, then future applicants must comply with that updated zoning bylaw if it's passed. So once, if we lay our cards on the table that we're gonna adjust it, someone can't come in the next day and preserve
Right.
the current zoning.
But if we talk about this now and don't act till later, they can take advantage.
Yeah. But if we move expeditiously and get an initial public hearing on a zoning bylaw to adjust overlay districts in a reasonable amount of time with, a couple weeks worth of work, 6-8 weeks worth of work, it's a little, I appreciate what you're saying. There's just the balance there. And a commercial development with a set of plans that would actually meet the requirements of a planning board submission, not impossible, but not simple either.
Anything else on this? We'll wait to hear back from you as to whether or not we can,
Yep.
okay. The other thing we wanted to just touch on,
Yeah.
electronic voting.
Yep. Yeah, so for this special town meeting, we just received, a week ago on Tuesday, today, I guess, a week ago today, the response from the Attorney General approving our bylaw adjustments. We will not have electronic voting in place for town meeting this fall. There's a number of factors that go into that, but including staffing capabilities to be able to do that. So with the timing of town meeting, we're not going to have it. We've had the conversation with the moderator. He is in the same position. So I just wanted to mention that, and we'll try to talk about that throughout the process.
So the goal is May, or
Maybe
if we have a
town
special
meeting.
town meeting prior to that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So this was just review and discuss. Any other discussion on the special town meeting warrant? All right. Then we'll move on to item number 9, which is to review and act on the one-day wine license application of Abigail Scaff Broken Creek Vineyard for the Shrewsbury Food Truck Festival located at 150 Maple Avenue on September 13th, 2025, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is someone who has gotten a one-day license before, so they're not required to be present at the meeting this evening. Ms. Scaff will be serving wine at the Food Truck Festival, and that's really all there is. Documents are all in order.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 10 is to review and act on the one-day beer license application of Jonathan Muldoon, Clover Road Brewing Company for the Shrewsbury Food Truck Festival located at 150 Maple Avenue on September 13th, 2025, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., so similar to the item that we just reviewed. This is just another food truck festival application.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 10 is to review and act on a street sign request from Dan Adams for Gold Street pursuant to Select Board Operational Policy 6, and that is our advisory sign policy. So for this one, this item is requesting the board's approval of a street sign that says horse crossing on Gold Street. So these advisory signs, as we discussed earlier, have no enforcement value. They do fall under our policy 6, which states that residents may install these signs, but it will be at their sole expense with prior approval of the board. Mr. Adams has been informed that he would be responsible for the installation cost and has acknowledged that he would like to proceed if the board votes in favor. Any questions, comments?
I move the board approve the street sign request from Dan Adams for Gold Street pursuant to Select Board Operational Policy 6.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that moves us on to correspondence. So item number 14 is an email dated August 12th, 2025 from Krista Dupre, 14 Candlewood Way, regarding the Beal project vote. Item number 13 is an email dated August 27th, 2025 from Brian Costello, 398 Walnut Street, regarding a violation of the Town Manager Act. And Mr. Mizikar, if you wanted to just
I do, yeah.
give
So,
us an update there.
I mean, this is there is a provision that Mr. Costello cites within his correspondence that, within the Town Manager Act, that has been a conversation with the board over the years about, there's a provision in there that says board members shall not hold another appointed or elected public office or title. I may not have it perfect. If you're on the select board or the school committee. So I engaged with council on this matter to try to refresh my memory on why we've been doing what we've been doing. And it really falls down to ex officio appointment. So when a board member is appointed because of a other office they're holding on a board or committee that is not permanent, then they are continuing to serve in the duty of the title or position that they hold. And it's not a new title or position. And that is a premise that's also found in Chapter 268A of the general laws, which is the state ethics law, which deals with holding multiple offices. So basically, when a board member is appointed because they are a board member, then it does not violate that provision. Again, it can't be on the planning board or the ZBA or any of the other permanent committees, but when it's ex officio to an ad hoc committee, then it does not violate the act. There is an issue with the appointment of the school committee member, who came in as a resident applicant, but Ms. Fritz is a school committee member, and she was not appointed because of her school committee member status, so the board would have to remedy that in some way at a future meeting.
Thank you.
So, and I just will also point out, with regards to Mr. Garcia and his appointment to the Affordable Housing Trust, there's one other component to that besides his ex officio status. It's also that the general laws, when it comes to Affordable Housing Trust, says in any community where there's a multi-member executive, chief executive, like you all are, that there shall be a member from the board on the Affordable Housing Trust. That was passed after the Town Manager Act, and that's constantly been upheld. That would supersede our act. So that's why that was put in place when the Affordable Housing Trust was established in 2022, I think it was. So.
All right, so the board will have that as a future agenda item. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Items number 14 through 24 are all emails related to fluoride. Item number 25 is an email dated August 28th, 2025, from Amy Bolter, 12 Westview Avenue, regarding support for Brian Costello to be appointed to the Form of Government Committee. The item number 26 is an email dated August 28th, 2025, from Elaine Vadenez, 45 Spruce Street, regarding Brian Costello. Item number 27 is an email dated August 29th from Naomi Halpern, 131 Stony Hill Road, regarding fluoride. Item 28 is an email dated August 29th, 2025, from Amy Bolter, 12 Westview Avenue, regarding fluoride. Item number 29 is an email dated October 30th, 2025, from Naomi Halpern, 131 Stony Hill Road, regarding Brian Costello. Item 31, email dated September 1st, 2025, from Lawrence Winberry, 60 Commons Drive, number 59, regarding fluoride. Email dated September 2nd, item 31, 2025, from Christine Martineau, 16 Hickory Drive, regarding fluoride. And then 32 is an email dated September 4th, 2025, from Sam Rajwani, Shrewsbury High School, class of 26, regarding a public records request. And then the last four are ZBA decisions. Items 33 through 36 are all decisions of the ZBA. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. But before I take a motion to adjourn, I do want to recognize Justin Dobson for his service to the town and thank him very much and tell you that we are so grateful for all that you've done for us, and we wish you all the best. Justin will be serving as an aide to the city council in Worcester. Your last day here with us is Friday, so if anybody wants to stop in and say goodbye to you, they need to do that before Friday.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best and hope you keep us updated on how things are going for you in your new position.
I will. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, there's no further
Congratulations, Justin. We're gonna miss you.
items. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good evening.